constitutional reviews gives us an opportunity to come up with homegrown solution. Mzee Warioba, I'm happy that we did not have the constitution when we thought we would have it. You now have had the advantage of seeing our Kenyan constitution, which I think now has created an environment that makes governance very difficult. When you make a constitution, make a better constitution than we did. I'm submitting to us that we must now look at our constitution as the primary governance document in order to ensure that we create hygiene in our politics. First of all, there is a sense in which the electorate must also be educated. Democracy presupposes that the electorate is mature and the electorate knows what it wants. 3 days ago, an individual from my ethnic group called me and he told me this time round we are taking it. And I said, who are we? And he told me, don't you know? I knew what he was saying, of course. And immediately I told him, never, ever appeal to my ethnic sensibilities. I did not go to school that I vote individuals because they come from my ethnic group. Tell me their agenda on health, their agenda on agriculture, so that if I vote for them, it should just be coincidental that we come from the same ethnic extraction. I'm submitting to us that even you, the electorate, when you are called upon to vote, vote right. I remember in 2007 when I attempted to seek a parliamentary seat and I had a 10-point agenda with sera zangu. The people said, sisi hatutaki sera, tunataka karo. Then I told them subsequently that how is it, and I repeat it again here, you have been given an opportunity to elect. You elect a hyena to take care of goats, and then when the goats have been eaten, you wonder why. I'm submitting to us that one of the ways is having a new constitutional dispensation. The other thing that we must do beyond the institution, beyond the constitution, is to have institutions. Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere, whom you now rightly refer to as Baba wa Taifa, said, you are not successful until your successor succeeds. Today, Mwalimu Kambarage Nyerere is successful because his successors have succeeded. Did you not have Mzee Mwinyi? Did you not have Benjamin William Mkapa? Did you not have Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete? Did you not have John Pombe Magufuli, who have seen and said, we must protect the sitting presidents? In order to preserve the nation, sometimes memories must be selective. I remember after the civil war in Nigeria, the young Yakubu Gowon, receiving the Biafrans who had surrendered, said, brothers, I'm happy to see you. And the commentator says, at a critical point in Nigerian history, the victor did not gloat and the vanquished were not humiliated. What Pombe Magufuli is doing is right. There is no future without forgiveness. There is no future without selective memories, but we must never forget. I'm submitting to us that the only thing that survives and will introduce hygiene in African politics is institutions. Because institutions will exist beyond us. And I'm happy to say that in Tanzania, one begins to see institutions. One begins to see individuals who are smaller than institution. Because if you are larger than institution, then you consume institution. And Mobutu Sese Seko reminded us that when he changed his name from Joseph Desire Mobutu to Mobutu Sese Seko Kukumbendu Wanzambanga. And when he died, until today, the Democratic Republic of Congo is not at ease Beyond the institution, the other thing that we must do is that we must have men and women of integrity. These men and women of integrity are not angels. They'll have made mistakes, but they'll have learned from those mistakes. These men and women should be subjected to certain ideals. That is why Mwalimu Nyerere once again said, lazima tuwe na siasa ya maadili na miko. There must be taboos in politics, the do's and the don'ts. Tukiwa na sera huria, basi ni uhuni utatamalaki. I'm submitting to us that we must have integrity in order to inject hygiene in Kenya, in African politics. I'm submitting to us the fourth thing, that the other thing that we must do is that we must de-ethnicize our politics. And I'm saying, it doesn't mean that you reject your being a Sukuma or a Mhaya or a Luo or a Kamba. Celebrate all those. But remember that in order to produce melodious music, you play the white of the piano and the black of the piano, and lo and behold, there is symphony, and there is harmony, and there is joy. I'm submitting to us that in order to introduce hygiene in our politics, the quality of the lives of the people must be improved. The gross national happiness index must improve, not the gross domestic product. I'm submitting to us that the misery index must go down. In other words, young Tanzanians and young Africans must have the opportunity to realize their potential. They must not go out to be humiliated. You know, today, and if there is any Chinese in the assembly, forgive me, because the Chinese are an amazing people. 30 years ago, China was a third world country. Then they made a decision, and China will never be the same again. I want to submit to you, all of you who are in this assembly, 99% of the things that you have are from China. If it is your phone, even if it is iPhone, it is assembled in China. Everything we have is from China. China has become the factory of the world. They know what they want and they are going for it. I'm submitting to us that if we are to produce hygiene in African politics, we must know what we want. Nyerere used to say, wakati mwingine wa Afrika tunabaki tunashangaa na kuduatu. Wachina hawa. I'm submitting to us that China knows what it wants, and Africa must now ask herself, what does she want for her women? What does she want for her young men and women? And I have no doubt that we have the wherewithal to find out what we want. I'm submitting to us that we must also introduce equality and inclusivity. Our women must be given their pride of place. And I must say, you know, somebody said something with which I agreed terribly 2 days ago. Why must it be that when we are dealing with our women and our youth, we must create for them a microfinance? Why? For how long will our women be in micro enterprises? Why can't our women be involved in mega enterprises? I'm submitting to us that we must mainstream our women, because 52% of the population cannot be left in the periphery. And I'm saying that when you include everybody, when everybody is at the dinner table, then everybody will be happy, because the last time I checked, I used to think that there were two ways of being at the dinner table of civilization. And I used to say that at the dinner table of civilization, you can be present as a waiter or a diner. But 2 days ago, somebody told me, no, that you can also be the food to be eaten. So Africans, choose you now. What role you want to play at the dinner table? Do you want to be the food to be eaten? Do you want to be the waiter to be waiting upon the diner? Or you want to be the diner? Africans have been food for too long. Africans have been waiters for too long. This is the time to be diners at the dinner table of democracy. I'm submitting to us that we are not children of a lesser God. I'm saying that there is a tide in the affairs of man which, taken on a crest, leads to great fortunes. But if you miss them, it leads to great miseries. Shakespeare was right. Chinua Achebe was right. If you want and you seek, you will never fail to find. Difficulties may and indeed will exist, but it's through overcoming them that we grow stronger. And I'm submitting to us that we have the ability to do that. And to the young Africans, Chinua Achebe posed the question, where are the young suckers that will grow when the old banana dies? Are you those young suckers that will grow when the old bananas who are seated here die? Because the future of Africa is in your hands. Young Chinese are coming here, teaching us how to read Mandarin. Are we teaching them Kiswahili? Young Chinese are coming here working 7 days a week. Are you working 7 days a week? You artists, kuku can vaa raizoni, but beyond varing raizoni, the kuku must land and liberate Africa. You young Africans, why are you going to Europe and America? You young Africans, why are you celebrating Manchester United, not younger? You young Africans, why don't you have Sande Manara and Gibson Sembuli recreated rather than Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi? You young Africans, why are you celebrating Julio Iglesias? Why are you not celebrating Farida Karoli? Why are you not remembering Baraka Munshehe Mwaruka, soloist national? I'm submitting to us that in order to have political hygiene, we must also have self-esteem. Kwa Kiswahili lazima tujiamini sisi. Self-esteem. Once we have self-esteem, that we know that we are equal and that God in his divine wisdom decided the God that I worship is a God of diversity. He looks at a white man and a white woman and he says, behold, the great creation. And he turns to the Arab, the brown Arab, and says, oh, what a good brown creation. And he turns to the slitty-eyed Chinese and the Japanese and he says, behold, what a great creation. And he turns to the Negroid and says, I perfected it here. What a perfect turn. So that when we sit at the dinner table of civilization, it is the diversity that we should look forward to. And I'm submitting to us that once we've done all that, then Africa will be great. Once we have done all that, Africa will be great and Africa can be great. But Africa will not be great on the basis of pronouncements. I know that the Africans sat in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and came with Africa Agenda 2063. But Africa will not realize Agenda 2063 when 90% of African Union budget is externally financed. He who calls the piper calls the tune. That old English saying is still true. Because as they say in French, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they remain the same in Africa. But I'm submitting to us that this time round, they must not remain the same. So, fellow Africans, and individuals who may not be Africans but are from other civilizations and our sisters and brothers, make Africa great. This continent can be great. Make Africa's education great. Let Dar es Salaam University be great. Let Nairobi be great. Let Fura Bay in Sierra Leone be great. Let our education be great, and we will make it great. Let African agriculture be great. Let us feed ourselves. Let us have food and beef and chicken and grains made in Africa. Let African agriculture be great. Let African infrastructure be great. Let us have the new train moving from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia to Dhaka in Senegal, and from Cape Town to Cairo. Let there be great infrastructure. Let us have one passport so that when I arrive at Dar es Salaam, I'm not asked for my passport. Please, let us have one. Let us have one currency so that I don't have to fly for 1 hour and I confront Tanzanian shilling. I fly for 55 minutes, I confront the Rwandese franc. I confront the Angolan kwanza. Let us have a unit of currency which is uniform. You can call it the Afro, whichever name you prefer, but let us have one currency. I'm submitting to us that we can be great. Let us have our women occupy their pride of place. Let us make the Congo, the Silicon Valley of Africa. Let us make Niger or Burkina Faso the head of nuclear power. Let us make Congo and the Kariba the production headquarters of electricity. Let there be light in Africa. Let there be light in Africa. And I'm submitting to us that that can be achieved if we introduce hygiene in African politics and African affairs. Let us have Africa Magulified. God bless you.
Naitwa Niki wa Pili, ni msanii wa rap. Mimi nataka kufanya tu tafakuri kulingana na aliyosema profesa. Na nataka ya maswali tu ya tafakari sisi, sio profesa. Cha kwanza, je, tulipelekwa ukoloni kwa sababu tulikuwa tuna low self esteem? Tulipelekwa ukoloni kwa sababu tulikuwa hatuna taasisi imara? Tulipelekwa ukoloni kwa sababu tulikuwa hatuna constitution? Nataka maswali mtafakari. Swali lingine ni kwamba ametoa historia ya viongozi wema na waovu. Je, swali ni swala la tabia ya mtu mwenyewe kuwa mlafi, kwamba kina Nyerere walikuwa na tabia nzuri na wakina Idi Amin kwa tabia mbovu, au ni swala la mfumo linamplace kiongozi kuplay role fulani ya ufisadi na mfumo wenyewe wa kifisadi? Swali lingine, tumesikia kina Nkuruma waliondolewa, kina Sankara, kina Lumumba. Kwa nini? Sio kwa sababu walikuwa kwa serikalini wanakataa kula rushwa. Waliondolewa kwa sababu walikuwa wanataka kuvunja mfumo wa kinyonyaji wa uchumi. Tusipoteze hiyo point. Kwa hiyo ukombozi wetu ni kubadilisha kiongozi, tusubiri aje kiongozi mwema, au ni kubadilisha mfumo wenyewe mzima? Tunasema tutengeneze katiba. Katiba ni mchakato wa kirasimu, ni mchakato wa tabaka gani? Tabaka gani litahozi mazungumzo ya katiba na litawakilisha interest za kina nani? Tunasema tutengeneze taasisi. Taasisi katika fikra zipi? Kwa sababu hiyo lugha ya taasisi inaongelewa na wakubwa World Bank wote wanaongea. Au taasisi katika lugha ya Mwalimu ya kusema vijiji ndio vituo vya demokrasia, vituo vya maendeleo, au vituo vya mamlaka? Je, tatizo ni rushwa au ni mfumo mzima? Kwa mfano mimi nagombea ubunge, natafuta hela za kampeni kuwa mbunge. Chama kinagombea urais, natafuta hela za kampeni kuchukua madaraka. Hizo hela wanapata kwa nani? Wanapokuja kupata mamlaka, hiyo mikataba waenda kufanya kwa nani? Kwa hiyo kumbe huo mfumo wenyewe wa demokrasia ni tool, ni chombo cha kufanikisha huo mfumo mzima wa unyonyaji ufanye kazi. Kwa hiyo profesa ameongea vizuri sana, lakini kwangu mimi nasema ukombozi wa Afrika hautaletwa na Mesaya, Masi. Hata ukiwasoma kina Mwalimu, kina Cabral, kina Sankara, waliogopa sana hiyo dhana ya umasi ambao sisi wote tunaiabudu. Leo tumejaa kwa sababu anakuja Profesa Lumumba. Ni dhana ya umasi. Hakuna wakulima hapa wamekuja kutoa mada. Hao ndio wanaishi umaskini kila siku. Hakuna wakonda, hakuna wapiga debe. Kuna hiyo hierarchy ya kuhodhi maarifa. Sisi wasomi ndio tutaongea. Wale wanyonge tumewaacha. Kwa hiyo kwangu mimi nataka kukazia kwamba mapinduzi pekee ambayo yataikomboa Afrika kwanza ni kuvunja huo mfumo mzima wa uchumi na kubadilisha mfumo kama Mwalimu alivyotaka kubadilisha mfumo. Turudishe nguvu kwa wananchi. Tukumbuke mapinduzi ya Afrika yalipigwa na wananchi, lakini viongozi walipokuja kuyashika na kukaa kwenye mikutano waliwalagai na kuwauza wananchi. Tunatengeneza taasisi, lakini Mwalimu alisema taasisi za kidemokrasia. Kwa sababu nzako ni taasisi lakini ni chombo cha ubepari. Kwa hiyo kwangu mimi naungana na profesa kwamba tumeona viongozi wachafu, lakini mfumo unawapa fursa za kuwa wachafu. Kwa hiyo lazima tuelewe mfumo mzima unafanyaje kazi na tools zake ni zipi. Mimi naogopa sana hizo lugha za taasisi, equality, kwa sababu wakoloni ni lugha zao hizo, katiba na kila kitu. Kwa mimi narudi kwa sababu iliyomfanya Sankara akawawa Hani wa South Africa, akawawa Lipumba, kwa sababu walitaka kubadili mfumo wa kiuchumi. Na ni lazima uanze na dira kubwa. Kama Mwalimu alibadilisha elimu, alibadilisha siasa na kila kitu, kutengeneza mfumo mpya, kama ambavyo wazungu walivyotoka kwenye ukabaila kwenda kwenye ubepari, waliua mfumo mzima wa ubepari. Kwa hiyo kama tunataka turudi, lazima tuue mfumo mzima wa unyonyaji na tools zake zote, tutengeneze mfumo mpya, ndio tutaweza kutoka. Lakini hizo lugha za katiba na nini, hizo ni lugha za warasimu. Asante sana.
I'm Dr. Wale Okedino, a former member of the parliament from Nigeria. And I have two questions for you. When you are making your beautiful presentation, you condemned President Mugabe for staying too long. But you are partial to Museveni and Paul Kagame. Are you trying to tell us that we can allow a little extension of office for our leaders? Or how do we do this? Thank you.
Thank you. I am Dr. Camillus Kasala of the Eastern Africa Statistical Training Center. I have followed Professor Lumumba's presentation. I would like to submit to us that this, what I'm going to say, will be the summary of his presentation, very short. There is no hygiene in African politics because of what I call the not always vicious circle. This circle begins with what is logical in African politics is not always practical. What is practical is not always right. What is right is not always ethical. What is ethical is not always desired. And what is desired takes us back to what is not always logical. Now, what is the hygiene? Mwalimu Nyerere avoided what I call temptations of 5 Ps. And I would like the young people here to listen very, very carefully, because the world today is everywhere broadcasting these 5P temptations. Please, future African leaders, the young people, avoid the first P. Avoid being the victim of the first P. The first P is power. Avoid being the victim of the second P, property. Avoid being the victim of the third P, prestige. Avoid being the victim of the fourth P, popularity. And avoid being the victim of the last P, pomposity. Waswahili wanaita mbwe mbwe. Mziepuke hizo zote. Asante sana.
Thank you very much. I believe I can answer from here. Let me start with the last question that you posed. And as I grow older, I hold the view that my answers do not necessarily represent the truth. This is my view of the issues. Opposition in modern day Africa is very reasoned. If you look at the first leaders, the whole idea of building the nation they thought could best be articulated by having one-party state. They said, we are so fragile, we are so diverse, that we must have one political party. And there is a sense in which they were right. If you look at your typical European nation, and I want you to look at Europe from Sweden, there will invariably be nation states. If you go to Sweden, they are the Swedes with a small Lapp or Sami population. And you'll find they have a small parliament for them. If you go to Norway, you'll discover they are Norwegians, almost 99%. If you go to Finland, the bulk of them are the Finns with a small Swedish population. If you go to Denmark, they are the Danes. If you go to the Netherlands, they are the Dutch. If you go to Spain, where there are multiplicity of ethnicities, then there are problems. You have a problem, you remember, during the reign of General Franco of the Basque country, even up till now, the Catalans, the Galicians. So there is a sense in which Europe, in fact, I dare say, Africa handles diversity better than Europe does. If you go to the Baltics, you find the former Yugoslavia, which has produced several countries from Yugoslavia. You have the Slovenes, the Bosnians, the Herzegovina. There is a sense the Soviet Union collapsed before our very eyes. But Africa somehow, and this was once again, many of you will remember in 1963, the Addis Ababa conference, and 1964, the Cairo conference, what is normally referred to as the Nasserite Nyerere's Nkrumah's approach, that we should not redraw African boundaries because it would create conflict. And there was a sense, therefore, that if you came to many African countries, they say, let us have one-party states. And many of the party states, the states or the parties that took over power were revolutionary parties. They were freedom-fighting parties. If you came to Kenya, Kenya African National Union, in Tanzania, TANU and Afro-Shirazi, in South Africa, African National Congress, MPLA, Frelimo, ZANU-PF, and all these parties. And they took the view, let us have one party so that everybody is under the umbrella of that party to avoid ethnic division. And one may quarrel about that particular approach, but if you look at it, there was merit in it. Then, of course, Europe persuaded us. Europe is always in the business of persuading us that you cannot have democracy when there is only one party, and that therefore we have multi-party politics. And many African countries were dragged wailing and kicking to this dinner table of multi-partyism. Nyerere was one of the cleverer ones. He did it before everybody did it and said, let us admit it. And you had NCCR, Mageuzi, Chadema, and all those parties. But the net effect is that the African politician is a very conflicted individual. Because on the one hand, he has culture and tradition defining how he behaves, but on the one hand, he also wants to behave as if he is a typical British or Dutch politician. So I say sometimes that when you look at an African politician, he suffers from split personality. And I say this in all seriousness. What the African politicians in many countries say on the platform is not what they believe in. And our own president, former President Daniel Moi, used to say it very well. After he had read the English speech, he would say, nimesema hayo nimesema, sasa wacha niseme. In other words, there are things that you say for the comfort and benefit of the so-called modern society and for Europe and America and Washington to hear, but there are things that you now say to Wazawa. And those things are different. So multi-party politics, because when you introduce multi-party politics, the assumption is that there are clear ideological differences. If you go to Europe and America and you talk about the Tories, there are ways in which they believe that government must be run in this way. You go to the United States of America, there are sense in which the Republicans have a way in which they think government should be run. If you go to different countries, but if you come to Tanzania, what is it that Chadema wants to do that is different from CCM? What is it that NCCR Mageuzi wants to do that is different from CCM? If you look at them, the difference is possibly 1%. If you go to Kenya, where we have 63 political parties, if you ask these individuals, what do you want to do? They'll tell you we hold the view. They'll not tell you in so many words. I'm the one who normally says it on national television. They hold the view that because the present administration is an administration that has brought together the Kikuyus and the Kalenjins, the next combination should now have the Luos and the Luhyas and the Kambas and a little Maasai